well, at least for me, it's good morning to our members and students at Kent Law School. Now, the last podcast with Joe Thompson, we did say it was going to be our last podcast. However, we have a bonus episode with the man, the myth, and the legend, Darren Weir. Now, this introduction has kindly been written by Angelica, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but Darren is a prominent member of the law school who everyone knows and seeks advice from. If you're part of that very small group of people who are yet to know him, the best way to describe him is that he is proactive. You will always see Darren in the law school and perhaps inevitably once a day. Darren has a plethora of experiences ranging from his incredible legal knowledge to his superlative managerial skills. I already thought of Darren as a flexible expert, but having the opportunity to research about him, I was happily surprised to know that he had a past as a businessman in the hospitality sector. This just comes to show how well-rounded Darren is as an individual. Well, enough of, giving an introduction that perhaps won't do justice to him in its totality. Welcome, Darren, and I'd like our members to welcome him. So, Darren, first and foremost, welcome to the podcast. And how are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm fine. So it is the 28th of March, and it is the last working day of the spring term. So I think, like everyone else, I'm knackered. I think students are knackered. Everyone's knackered. Everyone's tired, exhausted, but also sort of happy that spring's arrived and the sun's out a bit, and you don't have to wear a coat necessarily. So I don't know, I'm sort of mixed feelings really, because it's always a bit sad when the spring term comes to an end and students leave, because obviously I teach a lot of finalists, and today will be my last day of seeing many of them. The next time I will see them will be in the exam hall as I patrol the corridor, the aisles, and look at their statute books. That'll be the next time I see them. So yeah, mixed feelings today.
I agree. I mean, to be fair, even I have mixed feelings. I think the 3 years went by very quickly. And I'm sure you feel the same way, because you're almost seeing like generations of kids, and nothing to do with aging you. We're not talking about age here. But I think it's more so, you see these students from their first year to their third year grow. But I think importantly, Darren, you mentioned that, it's bittersweet, but I think we need to I have to address this. And I think before I get into sort of your career trajectory, congratulations are in order for being nominated for, Teacher of the Year award. Of course, it is much deserved. How do you feel about that?
Oh, well, thank you very much. And I have to thank the students who nominated me. So this is the OUP Law Teacher of the Year, which is great. So first of all, it was a bit of a process. I was nominated by some former students and current students. They got together and wrote the proposal, submitted it to the head of law school, who then opened it up to everybody in the law school to be nominated or put themselves forward. And then there was a little committee, as there always is. And I was selected by the law school, so that was great. I got the law school approval, and then I was put through, and then I got through to the final 5. So I was just totally amazed, baffled, and then of course shocked, because they then said, oh, we're going to come and watch. So that was the biggest daunting thing, was when they said, oh, we're going to come and watch you do a teaching session. And I thought, oh my god, here we go. So it was a bit like a whole palaver really, and it was they came down with a film crew of one person, but there was a cameraman, and there was a marketing person, and there were 2 judges, and they watched a class, they interviewed the head of school, they interviewed some academic colleagues, they interviewed about 10 students, and then they interviewed me. So it was a whole day, vigorous. So it's a very rigorous process. I don't think the Oscars are as vigorous as this, quite frankly. So I'm honoured, I'm proud, I'm flying the Kent Law School flag, because I think whenever anything happens to an individual of the law school, a bit like when students win competitions, enter competitions, or when academic colleagues publish a book, or they appear, as Soraya has just done. She's got through to the final of doing some sort of academic triathlon type thing, which was great. to going on stage and presenting. So whenever anyone from the law school does one thing, that's a positive reflection on us all. So I'm proud to be flying the KILS flag at the OUP Law Teacher of the Year, and fingers crossed for June. We find out then.
Of course, and we're all rooting for you, Darren. But Darren, I wanted to ask, you're a practitioner as well. Obviously, you're not practicing currently, and because you're in academia, do you think it's recognition such as this that give you an indication that whatever you're doing is right?
I hope so. I hope so. And I think it's also an indication to those of us who, because obviously you probably know that in terms of the academic staff, there are those who are on teaching and research contracts, and those who are on teaching and scholarship contracts, and those who are on teaching and scholarship contracts like myself are often former practitioners. We don't come from a pure academic background. And so there is sometimes a feeling that, well, you're not an academic, you're a pracademic. Helen Carr always came up with that expression as a badge of, I don't know whether she meant it as a slight, but I take it as a badge of honour. I'm proud to be a pracademic, bringing together the best aspects of practice and the best aspects of academia, and presenting that to students. And I think the Law Teacher of the Year, and in fact, they asked me a question, the fifth question they asked me was, what do you think we should be looking for in Law Teacher of the Year? And I thought that was an interesting question, because I said, well, it all depends on what signal you want to send out about what a law teacher should be. And for me, a law teacher should be someone who is passionate about teaching, as passionate as they are about their practice or scholarship or their research. It shouldn't be a secondary thing. It should be up there front and centre along with everything else that you do. So for me, it's about, that it symbolises, I hope, me being shortlisted, that people who focus on teaching, are being recognised. Those who are innovating in teaching are being recognised for something. So I'm also flying the flag for all those colleagues who try and think about new ways to teach, try and inspire, innovate. That's what I'm also flying the flag for too.
I wanted to pick up on that pracademic name that you mentioned. I was having a conversation with Emek, and I said to her, I feel as though the lecturers who were previously practitioners, they have something different to offer in their lectures. Perhaps it's the more practical element of the law. Do you think that makes you sort of stand out or makes your teaching different? And perhaps that's why the students are engaged in your lectures and seminars?
But probably right. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think Emmett hit the nail on the head there as well. So yes, I do agree with that. And I think being in practice, because we've had to deal with clients and communicate with clients or communicate with a court, we've had to present, we've had to persuade. So there is an element of performance, perhaps, in what we do automatically. It's sort of within us. Our default is to do that. And I think I had to write a 250-word blurb for this Teacher of Award thing, and they said, right, just write 250 about the way you teach and about your philosophy of teaching, etc. And I used this really corny line: I entertain to educate. I don't know whether that's right, but and then I thought oh no, that's really cheesy, and I was going to delete it, but I thought, no, hang on a second. But if you think back to school when you're a kid, and you're in the classroom, I don't know whether it's the same these days, but in my day, this shows how old I am, they used to wheel out the television on a big stand. Now they've got screens. And when you then watched a TV programme, an educational TV programme, and there was a programme at primary school called Look and Read, I remember, you remembered it because it came to life. Or when you had groups that come into school and do history in a day and do things like that reenact things, you remember it. And that's something that's always stuck to me. And then at secondary school, I had a history teacher who was amazing and brought history to life. And he'd use the blackboard and use stickmen cartoons all the time to illustrate history. And those sorts of things sort of stuck with me. And I thought, well, how can I introduce into my teaching little elements of that? And so that's why I'm crazy and do the things that I do, to try and keep it interesting and alive.
Can you mention these teachers who you remember for perhaps drawing stickmen? Darren, how do you want to be remembered as in the eyes of the students?
Oh, bless. Hopefully someone who's been a critical friend. I want to be a critical friend to people. So I want, but I also want to be remembered as being approachable and everything else. And I love it. The thing I love the most, particularly with the subject I teach, law of evidence, is when I get an email or a message on LinkedIn from a student just out of the blue saying, oh my God, thank God I did your module, because I'm now doing the SQE or I'm doing the bar course exams, and I didn't realise how much of it you covered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's brilliant, and that's what I love. So if I'm remembered for that, and I'm remembered for helping them get through their next stage of exams, that's great. If I'm remembered for helping them with decisions in careers, that's great too. So as long as you're remembered, I suppose, that's nice. And then when you get graduation, sometimes you get parents coming up to you and saying, oh, you're Darren, oh my God, don't stop talking about you, blah blah blah, and thank you so much for being someone to push them along. That's also nice. So that's what I'd like to be remembered for. Never for the moans and the groans that I do and the telling offs that I do, but I do that with love. So I hope that I'm not remembered for that, and I'm remembered for the fun things.
No, of course. I mean, even amongst our friend circle, we talk about you and sort of, the amazing things you do, but even the funniest things you do. Like the other day, Sivar and I were walking, we just saw you running. And I was like, oh my God, Darren is running. And I think you made a comment about wanting to be like Tom Cruise or something.
Oh
And
yes, I was doing the Tom Cruise arms, wasn't I? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
yes.
To be honest, I'm not much taller than Tom Cruise. I don't think me and him are the same height, although of course I have
Right.
a different width. So, oh dear, yeah. I think just doing wacky things, and the case classes and evidence have been described as Jerry Springer on acid, or whatever. So it's great. I don't mind any of that, as long as people remember things. That's the thing. I'm trying to always get them to remember things. Yeah.
Darren, I have to say, sometimes you remind me of Annalise Keating, but in a good way.
Oh, good. Do you know what? I love that program. Love it.
Yeah.
And the case classes are sort of based on that first episode where she walks in and says,
Yeah.
right, here's our client, bum, bum, bum. So that whole method is, well, to be honest, I think she based it on me, quite frankly, because I've been doing that for years.
Agreed.
Someone must have spied and reported back. But yeah, I do love that. And if students can relate to that, then that's great too. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, because I feel like you're the type of person, who would say to your students, we're not here to theorize about the law, I'm going to teach you it in practice.
Yes.
And so in line with that, do you think that sort of the validation you get from students is more important than, for instance, receiving awards or, things like that? Is that more important than the awards?
It is. It really is important. It's important to all the staff, actually. It's important to all lecturers. And I know that we sort of harp on about module evaluations and everything else, but those are so important, because that's an opportunity for us to reflect on our teaching practice. And also, if they're positive comments, and I really hope a lot of them are, it can be used for career progression. So it is so important. Your voice has a huge input in what we do, and therefore I'm so much more grateful for that than I am for getting an award or anything like that. Even though it's lovely to get nominated for things and so on, I'm not bitter at all that last year I got nominated in about 5 categories for the Student Union Awards but didn't win a bean. I think it's because I can never make it to the ceremony, so they don't give it to me, because I could never turn up because I'm always teaching. Yeah, so no, much more important to get student feedback all the time, hands down.
And I think, Darren, I think the one thing that I think we all have noticed about you is you're always trying to innovate, come up with different ways of putting the law to, into practice, into life. And, whether that's through the lawyering skills or the way you deliver it, what keeps you going exactly?
I suppose that does. Because I think I'd get bored. Okay, so obviously you mentioned my career. And I've done different things at different stages, and I will always, I will get itchy feet if I don't keep it current, if I don't change, if I don't try and mix things up. So yeah, so that's what motivates me really, because it's for me more than anyone, and not just the students, but it's also for me, because if I was just still stuck doing the same old lecture that I did 10 years ago, God, I'd be dead. You know what I mean? So that's why I do it.
And so, having been involved in the law school for so many years and doing everything that you do, what's been the most challenging part of it all?
Of the law school, of dealing with the law school. Oh, that's an
Well,
interesting
anything.
question.
I mean,
Oh,
even your
anything.
career.
My former career.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of the most challenging thing, I think, to be honest, was the start of a career. And that's why, again, I suppose within me, I really want to help students, because I recognise that as most difficult. And you see on LinkedIn all the time that I'm a first generation person at university. I'm from a background, I've got into law, fantastic, look at me. But you think, back in 1998, I did that. There were lots of people before that have been doing that for years, who are even before me. If you look at Bernard Richmond, Casey, look at him now and look at where he was. So, I started off as in 1998 looking for getting pupillage in 1998. I had no family in law. I was the first generation went to university. I went to Nottingham Trent University, which was a new university at the time, but had a fantastic law school, still does. And obviously I had no one to turn to for advice, etc. So I went out and tried to seek that advice myself. And there wasn't the resource there is now. There's no Legal Cheek. There was nothing like that. Nothing was online even, really. So that was tough. And so I got my pupillage. I got a first 6-month pupillage. I didn't even get a full 12 month. I literally had 1 6-month unfunded pupillage back in the day when you got unfunded pupillages. So, I can relate to people who have to fund themselves through education and through training. So I got the unfunded pupillage. That was hard work. That was my first challenge. I then, of course, had to try and persuade them to keep me on in second 6, which I did. But then during my first 6, of course, because it was unfunded, they didn't pay your travel. They didn't pay anything to you at all. I got a small pupillage award from the inn, which they used to then give, to help unfunded pupillages. And then at weekends, I would be doing working as a breakfast supervisor at the Holiday Inn Garden called Brent Cross. How may I help you? So breakfast supervisor there from 5:30 a.m. until 3 o'clock. And then at 5 o'clock, I'd be off to the Harvester, waiting tables, doing the bar until close on Saturdays and Sundays. That was my Saturdays and Sundays, to help pay for getting through pupillage. And then, of course, second 6 pupillage, you start actually earning some money, your own money, which was fine, but it wasn't much. So, of course, I still kept those part-time jobs at the same time. So that was the first challenge. Then the next challenge is getting tenancy. And so I didn't get tenancy where I was because they said, oh, there wasn't room, so don't bother applying. Although I found out subsequently that apparently they said they were surprised of me going because they just said that. I thought, well, why did you say it? Anyway, I then ended up going to Wolverhampton in the Midlands for 4 months, which was interesting. Couldn't understand a word they said, bless them. Or they couldn't understand me, one or the other. There was an issue there. So I was there for 4 months. And then I was like, I don't like it here. I need to come back down south because I'm a southern boy. I wanted to come back south. And that's when I found Canterbury. And that's when I found Stour Chambers in Canterbury in 1999, or just before the turn of the millennium. And got my probationary tenancy there, and then actually got an offer to go back to London. And I went to the chambers I was at and said, well, I've been offered a tenancy in 67 Gough Square, which was a leading consumer law set at the time, because I was also dabbling with consumer law at the time. But I really loved crime. I was just addicted to crime, the practice.
Right.
And so to say. And then I made Stour Chambers take me on. So then I got taken on, and then the rest is history. And then, of course, the next challenge is building up your own practice. And again, that was a challenge because, you know, God, provincial chambers doing crime. Oh my goodness. So there was big competition with the London sets. So I had barring tactics thrown at me left, right and centre. So that was a challenge. And then, of course, there was the whole criminal justice system challenge and no pay, having to do all the work, not getting paid for it, staying up till late, work-life balance problems. So then that was it. So everything you do is a challenge. You just have to keep going. So but the main challenge was the start. Once you've started, the ball starts rolling really, and then you just carry on.
And so what's been the most fulfilling part of it all?
The most fulfilling part. I suppose every bit has a fulfilling part, really. So the teaching is fulfilling, the award nomination fulfilling. When I was a hotelier, fulfilling there, and I owned my own hotel, but I also was chair of this big hospitality association. So I was invited to 11 Downing Street, met George Osborne, all that. That was fulfilling. Giving evidence to House of Lords Committee on online platforms, fulfilling. So everything, every element has a fulfilling element. Oh, getting my first murder brief, fulfilling. So all those, you know, moments, when you look back, they're so great, but when they happen, you might not realise so much. So nurture them when they come. Whenever you have an achievement, nurture it, because the feeling goes away because you're on to your next challenge. So fulfillment and challenge very much go hand in hand. One comes, the other comes, and then the next one comes. Yeah, it's interesting.
And so, you know, I completely agree that, you know, in the moment when things are happening, you don't appreciate it for what it is. But in retrospect, you do. So would you say that you reflect a lot on sort of everything that's happened, and then, you know, that's how you move forward and that's how you sort of progress?
Yeah, I think you have to make time for that. And so, for example, I will be making time for that coming up, you know, obviously with the end of a spring term, the end of an academic year, in a sense. I'll be doing a lot of that, you know, reflecting back on how the year has gone, what could be done better. So yes, I think try and pick your moments about when can you sit back and just think back about what you've just done there. And I hope that students use the Easter to do that when they're reflecting back on coursework returns and so on, ready for the exams. That's a big moment for reflection. It's not only just revision, it's about reflecting on how you did in previous work and how you can do better, because we can always do better everything.
Of course. And I think on the idea of time, how do you balance the sort of personal and professional? And I ask you this because, you know, as aspiring lawyers, the profession is difficult. It requires a lot of time, and especially, I mean, from, you know, what we hear from people in the beginning of your career, it's a lot of give and less take. And so, you know, you're someone who we see doing a million things at once, you know, and I mean, I think people would wonder, like, how does he balance his personal and professional? So how do you do that, Darren?
How? Wow. Well, firstly, talking about students and how you start out and the work-life balance then. Work-life balance when I started in training did not exist. I think employers are now starting to realise it isn't, and the legal profession does need to do better at it. But on the other hand, the legal profession might answer and say, and I've been having a lot of conversation with a lot of employers recently, and you've got to remember that people who are supervising you in training contracts or pupilages have been through those processes. And what they had to do is they had to prove themselves. Those first years are about proving yourselves. And you have to take the view that your training contract or your pupillage is basically an extended job interview. The whole thing is a job interview. You are on show all the time. Never let your guard down. Never trust anybody. Never say that you're tired. Never say anything that will reflect badly on you. Once you're through the door and you've got tenancy or you become an associate, that's when the brakes can come off, because then the firm trusts you or the chambers trust you, and therefore your time is more your own. So I've heard stories very recently at the Law Society dinner from associates who have trainees who said, who've told their trainees, come into my office. Can you come into my office, please? And they've said, oh, I'm busy. No, that wasn't a request. It was an order, essentially. So there is an element of, yeah, the change in view. So I think at Kent we really do drum in the professionalism of that, and that is not acceptable. So work-life balance basically doesn't exist when you first start. It doesn't exist. And that's the same with any new job. So when I started here as a permanent lecturer in 2018, when I was on probation, even though I was an hourly paid lecturer before for 7 years, I was put on 2-year probation. Your probation is, again, an extended interview. So you had to always push the boundaries and do more and do more and do more. And it's their way of getting blood out of a stone. It really is. And when you reflect on that, it's actually quite bad, really, isn't it? But if you want to progress, if you want to do well, then you've just got to always, at that point, put the work to the back. So what I always do, my practice is, when I'm away, I'm away. When I'm off, I'm off. The email message goes on. I may check the emails, and if there's anything really urgent, I may deal with it. But usually when I'm away, I'm away. Same with the Teams pinging, that goes off on the phone as well. And in fact, the wife would be very angry if I did start looking at my phone, etc. But I do, because I just can't stop myself. I'm addicted. I look at emails, but I may not answer them, but I do look at things because I need to know what's waiting for me at the other end. So I try and use the time as best I can, work-life balance. So, for example, I am going away next week, and so I will be away next week, and I will try and use that time to the best of its ability. So, but when I'm here in term time, and again, it's very different off term time here, but what students see when I'm in term time is that I'm 100% doing that. So that's why you see that. And I am switched on. I'm switched on all the time at home as well. I think a lot of your academics are. They're always switched on, always thinking, and you're never going to get that work-life balance. But that's because it's a profession. It's not just a job. So you're always switched on, which I'm afraid will never go away. And I think if you do if you are not always switched on, actually, when you're in a profession, then that should be a worry. Why aren't you doing a 9-to-5 job then in Tesco? Because that might be more suited to you. So it's hard, but I therefore say to you, use the time you decide to be off properly. Be off properly. You know, use the time in the evenings when you decide, right, the computer's off, the phone's off. Don't scroll through things, because again, I'm sure I don't know, when you're involved in a society, your society brain is always switched on. Oh, I'll do this post, I'll do this, I'll do that. Actually, that's work-life balance going tipsy-dovey, isn't it? So you just switch off, watch that box set. I had a day once, I had a Saturday, which I don't normally get. I'd sorted out the kids. The kids were, where were the kids? I can't remember. They were somewhere. They were having fun somewhere else. Laura was doing something as well. She was doing probably an applicant day or something away. And I ended up just watching a box set of one day. I just sat there and vegged. And that was good. And that was a good turn down. And I didn't realise I'd cry afterwards, but there we go. At the end. I don't know if you've seen that programme, but yeah, you do cry at the end. So yes, so basically, work-life balance sometimes doesn't exist, but when it does exist, make sure you use time properly.
You know, I completely agree with the aspect you said about, you know, this being a profession, in the sense that you're always switched on. I mean, as a student, I don't see a work-life balance. Like, even if I'm outside and I get an email, I will respond to it. I will not care what time of the day it is. Obviously, I will send the email knowing who I'm sending it to. So yes, I will not send lecturers an email at 11 p.m. But I think that part people, I feel, especially our generation, they miss out. They think they can sort of, you know, the law is like, okay, it's so lucrative, I'm going to get so much money out of it, but I don't want to put in that much work. So there's like almost like it's disproportionate to the amount of time they want to spend versus the output they want. Do you find that problematic?
I do find that thought worrying, and for some reason, very recently, in the last year or two, there's been a bit of a generation thing coming through which is all about the money. And and for some aspects of the law, money's great, fantastic. But there are other aspects of the law where, you know, actually money isn't the main thing you're doing this for. If you're doing it for money, then, you know, have a really have a serious think of yourselves, because if you want, the more you want to earn, the more you've got to put in. So if you want the training contract in the big Magic Circle firm, you are going to have to sell your soul to them. They have beds in the offices for a reason, people. They have a gym in the offices for a reason. So a lot of the time, just an hour at the gym is the only time they get on their own. So it is hard work. And also getting just your law degree isn't enough. You need to do all the other things that, you know, people like you do all the time to make themselves more marketable. But, you know, it's a dangerous thing, isn't it? You know, you described yourself having, when you see an email and you answer it. That's actually bad, isn't it? We should stop doing that.
I completely agree. I'm not promoting this. I think,
No,
you know,
I'm not either, but we should stop
yeah.
doing it. And we do
Yeah.
it because we care. We do it because we care.
Exactly. I think because we care, and I think there's a fine line between sort of caring for sort of your profession, others, and caring for yourself. And I think those lines are blurred
Yeah.
by way of us sort of responding. It's like these small things that have a bigger impact. But I mean, I guess I'm still, and this again is not to age you, but you know, I feel like I'm still young. So I mean, I hope at some point try and, like, you know, find an equilibrium between the two. But on the point of money,
It's when you get a family, Wadana, really. That's when it bites. Use the time when you don't have a family, your own family yet, and you've got those years in your 20s and early 30s possibly as well. Use them and enjoy them. And if you are the type of person who does see an email and you need to answer it because you're a think it, do it person, which is what we are, then do it, because it's only going to eat you up if you don't answer it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So actually that is sort of helping yourself as well, in a way.
Very true. And I think, you know, the aspect of, you know, how you said that if some people are doing this profession for the money, they need to think about it. Because for some people, which is fair, I mean, to be fair, like, I do agree that money does play a big role in one's life. You know, you have to look at your finances and, you know, and move forward. So that does define some people's idea of success. What is your definition of success?
Definition of success is being happy in what you do, finding what you do a challenge every day, and just, yeah, basically not regretting your decision of what you're doing. That is success. That is success. And if you're comfortable, of course, you know, you want to earn some money, as long as you're comfortable, right? As long as there's food on the table and there's money to do something with, and you feel self-fulfilled, then that's enough. We don't need fame. We don't need, you know, celebrity. We don't need TikTok followers and all this stuff. We don't need that. So don't beat yourself up about it. You know, if you've got family, if you've got friends, and you're enjoying what you're doing, then that's success.
So have you
Surely.
reached your version of success?
Oh God, no. You have ambition, you have success, and you have then ambition. They're two different things. I think people can always go to the next level and try and be ambitious to the next thing, you know, whether it be becoming a reader, becoming an associate professor, whether it be becoming a part-time judge, or whether it be becoming a partner. You know, there's always the next step in a career ladder. So, you know, I haven't reached the end of that yet. I'm comfortable. I'd be happy if I didn't move on anywhere anymore. I might get bored, but I wouldn't be unhappy. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, I am successful at the moment, I think, you know, in what I'm doing. But of course, you'll always then look for the next thing. And of course, your employers always look for the next thing as well, if you're being employed. And if you're self-employed, you're always looking about improving that income and improving your way of life and so on. So yeah, success, I think, is a movable goal, and it should always be. If you know, I think people who can look back at their careers, you know, that lady, if you look at the Lady Chief Justice, I'd say that she's reached the end of her career probably, but she probably doesn't think she has. Maybe next for her is Court of Appeal. No, so is the Supreme Court, or next is the House of Lords, you know. So everyone's always got goals, right? So just keep going for them.
Darren, you said that, there's always the next, but don't you think that's a bit dangerous in the sense like you never appreciate where you are and you're not content with like, whatever you've achieved thus far, and frankly, you don't celebrate because you're always like, oh, there's always something better to do. There's always
Oh,
something more to do. So there's the flip side of it as well.
well, yeah, that's what comes to what I always say about keep reflecting, because the reflection time is when you can celebrate and congratulate yourselves for doing this and doing that and whatever. So I totally agree with that, and you've got to keep doing that. And then if you stay still, then you're in danger of going stale again and then getting bored, and then you're in a cycle. So always celebrate what you've done. It's like it's like your journey, students' journeys. Graduation is a huge opportunity to celebrate success and achievement, but at the end of that day, you should be in your head saying, what's next? Yeah, it's a bit like, I don't know if you ever watched The West Wing. Have you ever watched the series The West Wing? It's like a political, you'll get it on box set now because it's a bit old again, a bit like me. Martin Sheen's in it as the president, and some episodes would always end. He had this phrase and catchphrase at the end of every drama or issue he dealt with, and he'd deal with it. They'd celebrate. They'd pat themselves on the back, and then he turned to his I suppose, what was the role? What's his face? Payne McGinty. I can't remember what the role was. He was chief of staff. He then turned to his chief of staff and say, "What's next?" Yeah. Next question has always been, "What's next?" So you've done the graduation. You've done that success. That's great. This is going to set you up. But then what's next?
I agree, and I think that's the predicament a lot of us are in right now. It's because I always say this, and I came to this conclusion after a lot of thinking. I feel like in law school, students have this predicament where there's a big gap between the student that they are and the lawyer they want to be, because a lot of sort of the trials and tribulations you face in law school somehow determine the type of lawyer you're going to be, or if you're even going to be a lawyer. And that's problematic because it really knocks your confidence down. And as much as, university is a safe space, as Joe mentioned, it's like a safe learning environment. I think the law is also very scary because it's so competitive and because there's so much out there about it. We don't know what to cancel out. We just consume everything and think all of it is right. And I think that aspect, as students, we're also trying to navigate. But on that note, I've noticed there's a theme in what you're saying. A lot of it is reflecting sort of theatrics and movies and TV shows. What is your relationship with, let's say, the film world or, theatrics?
Well, yeah, there was there is a connection. There was a connection a long time ago. So when I was a kid, I was into drama theatre. And so I went to a stage school. I went to the same stage school as James Corden. And so that's where my theatrics come from. So I did things like being at the National Theatre, doing BBC TV series, few commercials. If you search the internet, you might find an old commercial of me a long time ago as a kid. So Alison Steadman, who's of course in Gavin and Stacey, played my mum on stage. So yeah, so all that is there in my background, in my blood. And but then I was at school and they said, well, you've got to make because I had a stage school part-time and I was in a proper school as well, and I just a state school. The other time they said, well, your GCSEs are coming up, you've got to knuckle down now. What are you going to do? So everyone was like, oh, being an actor, it's dodgy profession, da 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 da. What about law? What about being a barrister? And I thought, oh, okay. So that's when I started looking into that career. And it's basically a different type of theatre. Being a barrister is treading the boards, if you're in court, that is. A different type of boards. So it's not a stage, but it is like a stage because you are presenting to a jury or a magistrates or to a county court judge, a particular narrative, a particular story. So that's always been in my blood. Then, of course, so that was then translated into the barristering. And then theatre continued because then I obviously left the bar for a while and did teaching on the side, whilst at the same time owning a hotel, running a theatre for 5 years. So I was chairman of the Eastbourne Hospitality Association, and the local council were going to close down a theatre. The hoteliers protested, and the council said, well, if you think you can do it, here are the keys. Wow, okay. So we turned a £50,000 loss-making theatre per year to a near on £1 million turnover theatre. Within 5 years, with a huge footfall of about 60,000 patrons a year. So that was fun. And that was fun because, of course, I got to meet people like Miranda Hart. She came and did her pre-O2 Arena gig there. What's his name? Lee Hurst, comedian. Jason Manford came a couple of times to do warm-up gigs. So, because the venue's about 500 seats, so we always used to get the comedians coming to do their warm-up gigs before they go and do the big tours. And then we did musicals. We did the summer stuff. There was a summer season show every year that we had to do. I even ran. This is going to be confession time now. I'm going to regret this one. We started. The theatre was called Hippodrome because it was a Hippodrome theatre, Royal Hippodrome Theatre, and we had a mascot, Henrietta Hippo, and yes, I was in the Henrietta Hippo costume. There you go. There's my confession for your podcast. Well, darling, you've heard it here. I was dressed in a hippo costume, and she had a tutu and everything and a crown. And we used to run this Saturday morning kids show once a month called Henrietta Hippo's Funhouse. And we used to have the Funhouse crew and everything else. And about 100 kids used to come every month on a Saturday. We had the hippo dance. We had it all. It was hilarious. And then as well with the hotel, I also ran, and this is where I suppose my writing of problem questions come from, because I also used to run a murder mystery dinner company as well. So I used to do murder mystery dinners at the hotel that I owned, but also other hotels as well. So a lot of the characters that appear in my problem questions are all old characters that I loved from my old Mowbray Murders days when I had that. So that was good.
I was telling Laura in the last applicant day, I said, we need Darren in a movie. Like, we need Darren to be in a movie. Like, I think the title should be Darren Weir in and as Darren Weir.
No, that wouldn't get audiences, I don't think. I think it'd be a bit boring. But I've had a varied life, and I think that's another message to send, isn't it? That if you don't go into law straight away, so what? You can go into other things first. When I look back on my LinkedIn, and I see former students who are probably earning far more money than me, doing non-legal work, but their law degrees help them get those jobs and become project managers in big projects and stuff. And they're doing amazing work. It doesn't have to be law. So that's another big key thing to remember. So
do you have any regrets, or?
Do I have regret? I sometimes, whenever I do advocacy, in the mock trial advocacy module in particular, which I love doing, and I also I continue I'm now training pupil barristers at Middle Temple, which I love. I'm about to become hopefully a new practitioner program trainer as well. I was at a weekend 2 weekends ago in Middle Temple, actually being a witness on an NPP one, which is great fun as well. So when I do things like that, I get a little inkling. Will I go back? Do I want to go back to the bar? I get the itch again. I'd love to be able to run it at the same time as academia or pracademia, but because I'd have to go back into crime, I wouldn't want to go into anything else. The way the court lists work and everything else is just impracticable, totally impractical. I know some lecturers, for example, at other institutions like ULaw, etc., do some advocacy over the summer, and they do some cases over the summer, but they're piddly. No, I wouldn't want that.
Right.
Because they'll just do sentences, or they won't do trials, probably. So I don't know. I'd love to go into, and I keep getting emails from Sarah Davis, who's the resident judge in family at Canterbury. The last email she sent me was offering a prize for our triathlon, of course, which is coming up. But then also saying her finishing line was, "When are you going to apply for judicial post?" Ooh, oh, I don't know whether I would be able to do that, to be honest, but because you have to show examples of when you've shown judgment and so on and so forth. And of course, although we do that in our job, it's hard to put. So, but yeah, so I do regret not doing things like that. So I do regret probably leaving the bar when I did, maybe back in 2009, but it was right at the time, and I don't regret it, actually. I regret it and don't regret it. It's a bit mixed feelings, really. So I do get little twinges of, should I go back, when I see students performing and I'm doing the advocacy, and I think, oh yes, I do miss a bit of this in real life.
You know, it would honestly be great to see you in the courtroom. But I guess if we didn't have you, Darren, like we wouldn't have what we have right now in the law school. And for that, we are very grateful.
Thank you.
And so to conclude, Darren Weir in 3 words.
Darren Weir in 3 words. Okay. Father, husband, legend. How's that?
Wow.
That'll do.
I like that. I like that. You encapsulated your whole life, personal and professional, in those 3 words.
Yeah, that's what I like. So there we go. I've had to think about that, because you did give me notice of that one. And I thought, what do I do? What do I say? And I thought, is the legend one too pompous? Well, as you opened with it, I thought, well, why not? I'll keep it in.
Of course.
And yeah, you got a bit of self-indulging, haven't you?
100%. You need to be confident in who you are and what you are. As Guevara said, you know, he described himself as, I'm a vibe, because a lot of his students.
I'm a vibe.
Yes.
I love that. That is so good. Of course, I taught him all he knows. I'm sure he said. Well, he probably didn't. But he was one of my. You did know he was one of my students, did you not?
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? No. He was one of my students back in the day. So back in 2016, 15, 16-ish, around that time. Yeah, so he was one of mine. So there you go. He's another prodigy. He's another proud product of KILS. And again, you know, because he was very kind to speak to the judging panel for the OUP thing. And of course, he was able to come with that perspective of having been taught by me and worked with me as a academic as well. So that was really good. And I'm very proud of Guevara. I think he's a great asset to the law school. Absolutely. And his career is going to go far quicker than me. He's very, very ambitious. So, you know, wish him all the best. He's great.
Well, Darren, thank you for your time. We know that you are a very, very busy individual, especially at this time of the year. So having done this podcast with you, it's been great. And I'm sure our listeners are going to thoroughly enjoy listening to this.
Well, if anything, they'll go away from this and have an image of me in a hippo costume dancing a hippo dance. So with that, we're done. And thank you very much for hosting me. And I'm wishing everybody a great end of term, whatever you decide to do.
Thank you. And to our members, you know, hopefully next year someone will continue this podcast. But till then, we hope you enjoyed the bonus episode. We hope you enjoyed the bonus episode and all the episodes so far. And thank you once again, Darren, and we'll see you soon.
See ya.